Good evening, everyone. For this week's presentation, I chose to talk about 4 different techniques you can use to improve your readability in business writing and messages. I chose this because I have a tendency to sometimes be terrible when it comes to writing papers or business messages because I have a tendency to either be too wordy or not explain things enough. So I found this to be an interesting topic to really look at and dive through. So let's take a look at those 4 different techniques. The first technique is to vary the length of your sentences. That's to use a combination of short, medium, and long sentences. And it's also to use a variety of the combination. You don't want to use too many short sentences because the reader could become disinterested, and you don't want to have too many long, tedious sentences one after another because, again, it is really easy for your reader to become disinterested or stop paying as close of attention to the sentence. So it's important to use a variety of the sentences, and this will help to keep your reader interested. I know on a personal level, I have a tendency to write too much into one small area, especially using more long sentences than anything. And that is something I'm trying to do better with, especially on writing my essays, because I have a tendency sometimes to write several long sentences back to back to back. And so that is something I'm trying to be more aware of. Keep your paragraphs short. This is something else that I have a hard time with. Short paragraphs are easier to read. They invite the reader in, but they are not so long that the reader becomes bored or disinterested. Typically, your paragraphs should be around 100 words or less. And I don't know about anybody else, but I have a really bad tendency when writing papers that I get very wordy, and such as I had a class where we had to do a lot of 5-paragraph papers, and on the 5 paragraphs, he wanted them to be pretty strictly 5 to 7 sentences, and I had a tendency to be a little too wordy, and the paragraphs were more 10 to 20 sentences. So it's important to keep those paragraphs short to keep the reader interested and to not overwhelm them with so much information on one particular topic. Use lists and bullets. These can be important, especially if you're listing out different ideas for cleaning processes or how you want somebody to handle a list that you're giving them. It clarifies and emphasizes your point, and it can also simplify the point. So instead of explaining something in a 2-page paper, you can use that bullet list to really emphasize what it is you want them to do and get right to the point. These are easier to read, and more importantly, if you put a list or a bullet in a message or a paper, it's easier for the reader to go back and find because they know what they're looking for, and it looks a little different than the rest of the message or the rest of the paper, and it really, really emphasizes and highlights those main points. So using lists and bullets more often in a business message really can help a reader to stay focused and to know what it is you're trying to get across. Add headings and subheadings. This is also something that I learned a little bit with in my last class because we had to do a strategic plan, which was all about having a main heading and then a bunch of different subheadings as to how we were going to write that plan with doing smaller subheadings such as financials, marketing, and things like that. So adding headings and subheadings helps with organization, and it helps the reader to be able to find what point they're really looking for, and it keeps their attention more because they know what they're reading. And it helps readers connect with what's being discussed. It helps them to know in this section you're going to learn about marketing. And when you get to the next subheading, you're going to learn about the financial statements. So it helps the reader to be able to understand where you're going with it. That is my presentation for this week. So I hope everybody took away from this is that it is important to use these 4 techniques to help shape your business messages, to make them easier to read and to keep your readers' attention. It's really important to not lose your readers, because if you do, they may miss the actual important information that you're really trying to get across. So it's important not to be too wordy, and it's important to use a variety of different methods when writing that business message to keep things simple and keep things emphasized. Thanks for tuning in.